If we take a second look at Locke's, or this excerpt from Locke's Second Treatise of Government, you could say that there are two arguments here. They are closely related, but they may be two distinct arguments. The first one is an argument about the purpose of government, what government is for. The second argument is in the section 222 here, is an argument that the individuals who compose what he calls a commonwealth, which is a civil society, a political community, that the individuals who compose the commonwealth have the right to dissolve it if they judge that the government is not doing what it's supposed to do. Let's take a look at the first argument. Make it a little bigger here. If man in the state of nature be so free, as has been said, if he be absolute lord of his own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody, why will he part with his freedom? So the background here is that really with all liberal political theorists, the assumption is that human beings as individuals are born free. That is, that they are autonomous. So that governments have to be based upon the consent of the individual to be governed. That is, the individual has to agree, consent, to enter into a political community and to abide by its laws and to accept the judgment of the legislature and the judgment of the rest of the government. That has to be a free choice on the part of the individual. And the question here is, why would anybody do that? That is, if we are born free, if we're in the state of nature, if we are absolutely free, why would we part with this freedom, as he says? Why will he give up this empire and subject himself to the dominion and control of any other power, that being the power of law and government? To which it is obvious to answer that though in the state of nature he hath such a right, that is, in the state of nature we have absolute right to rule ourselves, yet the enjoyment of it is very uncertain and constantly exposed to the invasion of others. For all being kings as much as he, every man is equal, and the greater part no strict observers of equity and justice, the enjoyment of the property he has in this state is very unsafe, very unsecure. This makes him willing to quit a condition, which, however free, is full of fears and continual dangers. So we are all born free. We all own ourselves. We're able to, we legitimately own whatever we've earned, whatever we mix our labor with. But our enjoyment of this is very uncertain because of other people, encroaching upon our rights. And so the reason that we part with our absolute freedom to live under law is the protection of our property. Because although we have right to property, and it's important to see what he means by property, but although we have a right to property, we may not be able to enjoy it because of the practical uncertainties of living in a community without an established government. So that's why we established the government. So he continues and says it is not without reason that he seeks out and is willing to join in society with others who are already united or have a mind to unite for the mutual preservation of their lives, liberties, and estates, which I call by the general name property. So it's important to note in Locke what he means by property: lives, liberties, and estates. You own yourself, your life, your bodily life, your life as a person. Your liberties, your freedoms are things that you, in a certain sense, own. And your estates that's your stuff, that's your things, the land, the material things, the wealth that you're able to accrue. All these things are things that you would be considered property, and the protection of which, your life, your health, your freedoms, your physical or your other types of property and wealth. All these things you you have by right, natural right, but you agree to enter into a state of civil society under government in order to protect them from the encroachments of others. And this leads to a conclusion. The great and chief end, therefore, of men's uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. So, what you have here is a little argument, and that's the real conclusion. You could say that the question is, why do human beings create governments? And the answer is for the preservation of their property. So it's a little, there's an argument here. Human beings are born free. They own themselves and whatever, and their estates. They enter into civil society, enter into government, give up some of their freedom at least, in order to protect that property, that natural property. And so the whole purpose of government is the protection of property. Now, the second part here, Section 222, is a separate argument, a distinct argument that I would say basically argues that the individuals who create society have the right to dissolve it. So he says the reason why men enter into society is the preservation of their property. And now that's taken as a premise of the argument rather than the conclusion. So it's a distinct argument. And the end, the purpose, why they choose and authorize a lawmaking authority like a Congress or a Parliament, is that there may be laws made and rules set out as guards and fences to the properties of all the members of the society, to limit the power and moderate the dominion of every part and member of the society. That is, the purpose of legislation, the purpose of government is to protect, through law, protect people's property. And again, that means their lives and freedoms, not just their things. For since it can never be supposed to be the will of the society that the legislative should have a power to destroy that which everyone designs to secure by entering into society, and for which the people submitted themselves to legislators of their own making. Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people. So the whole purpose of government, creation of government, is the protection of property. Widely understood, right, what property means. So whenever government, instead of protecting property, destroys it, it puts itself into a state of war with the people because it's going against its purpose as, here set out, who are thereupon absolved from any farther obedience, right? So that's the key point. The idea that once government, instead of doing its job of protecting the property of the people, actually destroys it, then it puts himself in a state of war with the people, and then the people are absolved from any further obedience and are left to the common refuge which God has provided for all men against force and violence, that is, rebellion. Whensoever, therefore, the legislative shall transgress this fundamental rule of society, and either by ambition, fear, folly, or corruption endeavor to grasp themselves, or put into the hands of any other an absolute power over the lives, liberties, and estates of the people, by this breach of trust they forfeit the power the people had put into their hands for quite contrary ends. Right? The whole government is created by the people and is created for a purpose: protection of property, widely understood what property means. Those are the contrary ends. Right? Those are the true ends that true purposes of government. When instead government becomes tyrannical, it contradicts those ends, transgresses against those ends, those purposes. And he says it devolves to the people, who have a right to resume their original liberty, and by the establishment of a new legislative, such as they shall think fit, provide for their own safety and security, which is the end for which they are in society. It's basically an argument here for a revolution, that individuals create government for their own purposes, and when government transgresses those purposes, when it it contradicts or what would we say, betrays the purposes for which it's created, the people, the individuals, then have the right to dissolve that government and set up a new one. They revert back to the state of nature. So it's an argument for the sovereignty of the people. That is, once they create a government, it doesn't mean they have to stick with it forever. They can dissolve it. They can bring down a government to create a new one, so that, and this is justified because there would have to be the government actually going against its own purpose for which it's created. So it's an argument for the right of the people to dissolve government should they see fit. Very interesting.